Hello there, friends. Grab a cozy seat and prepare to be whisked away on a riveting tale of love, heartbreak, and unexpected second chances. Enjoy the story. The trendy downtown cafe was bustling with the post-work crowd, but Samantha barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on Jake Reynolds, the devastatingly handsome man seated across from her, the man she had given everything to for the past 2 years. "You're pregnant?" Jake's chiseled jaw tightened as he spat out the words like venom. "You stupid little bimbo. You did this on purpose to trap me, didn't you?" Samantha's perfectly made-up face crumpled in shock and pain. No, Jake, I swear I didn't. I would never." He cut her off with a cruel laugh, pushing a wad of cash across the table. "Here, get rid of it. This fling was fun, but you're too dull to make a decent wife." With that parting shot, Jake shoved back his chair and stormed out, leaving Samantha sobbing into her hands, the other patrons averting their eyes in embarrassment. The icy winter rain lashed at Samantha's face as she wandered aimlessly down the city streets, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. How could Jake do this to her after everything they'd been through? She was carrying his child. She jumped as a gentle hand landed on her shoulder. "Miss Davis, are you quite all right?" Squinting through her tears, Samantha recognized the concerned face of Professor Martin, her faculty advisor at the university medical program. She opened her mouth, but no words came out as a fresh wave of sobs overtook her. There, my dear," the kind older man soothed, steering her towards his car. "Why don't you come have a warm cup of tea and tell me what's troubling you?" Samantha sat shivering on the overstuffed sofa in Professor Martin's book-lined study, the hot tea reviving her slightly. As the whole sordid tale poured out, the pregnancy, Jake's horrid reaction, his insulting parting words, the professor listened with a look of deepening compassion. "My dear girl," he said at last, taking her hand in his soft, papery one, "you're far too bright and strong a woman to be thrown away like discarded rubbish. Might I make a proposal of an unconventional nature?" She stared at him in bewilderment as he explained. He had been offered his dream job, heading a medical research facility in Switzerland, but it was contingent on him having a wife and family for appearance's sake. "A marriage of convenience, if you will. We can have a simple ceremony, and you'd come with me, have your child, and live as part of my family for the duration of my contract. When it ends in a few years, you'll be free to go your own way, keep the house I'll provide for you, and make a fresh start." The shock was quickly giving way to grudging interest. A chance to escape her shattered life, travel, build her career, and be free of Jake forever? "You would do that for me, Professor?" A gentle smile crinkled his eyes. "Of course, my dear." 25 years later. The penthouse study was an oasis of sophistication high above the gritty Chicago streets. Rich mahogany paneling, deep leather chairs, a wall of beveled glass looking out over the city's iconic skyline. Jake Reynolds paid no attention to the stunning view as he paced in front of the crackling fireplace, cell phone pressed to his ear. "What do you mean, get to a hospital? Don't be ridiculous. This is just a bit of indigestion." Even as he brushed off the concern in his assistant's voice, a sharp spike of pain lanced through Jake's midsection, dropping him to his knees. He sucked in a ragged breath as the line went dead. Only minutes later, the still figure sprawled on the thick carpet was barely recognizable as the handsome, healthy playboy of his youth. His face was pale and drawn, beaded with sweat as fresh waves of agonizing pain ripped through his abdomen. By the time the paramedics arrived, Jake was semi-conscious and quickly slipping into shock from the internal bleeding caused by a severely ruptured ulcer. He barely registered the gurney or the oxygen mask, only the urgent voice telling him he needed emergency surgery immediately. The blinding overhead lights, the amplified sound of his own shallow breathing, the stark sterile smells. It all came rushing back to Jake as he was wheeled into the operating room. He had awoken from the anesthesia in rooms just like this countless times before, usually with a smug smile and a new Conquest's number programmed into his phone. But this time, something was different. Something he couldn't quite put his finger on until a familiar figure in surgical greens stepped through the swinging doors. Dr. Miller?" Jake choked out in shock, squinting against the brilliant lights. He would know that thick chestnut hair twisted into a neat bun anywhere, even after all these years. Samantha stiffened almost imperceptibly before turning to accept the scalpel from the nurse. "All right, people, let's get Mr. Reynolds prepped and opened up before he bleeds out on us." Her calm, clinical voice was like a bucket of ice water shocking Jake back into the present moment. As the anesthesiologist slipped the mask over his face, his eyes remained locked on the woman he had so callously tossed aside over 2 decades ago, the woman who was now going to hold his life in her hands. Samantha stepped out of the scrub room, peeling off her sweat-soaked surgical cap and shaking out her hair as she made her way down the bright corridor. Even after all these years, she still felt a rush of adrenaline and satisfaction after a successful, challenging procedure. "Nicely done in there, Dr. Miller." She turned to see her colleague, Dr. Chen, feeling alongside her with an admiring look. The younger man's eyes crinkled in an unspoken question as he studied her preoccupied expression. "That a former patient of yours? You seemed familiar with him." Samantha exhaled slowly, debating how much to reveal. "Let's just say Mr. Reynolds and I have some unfinished business." As she made her way to her office, Samantha's mind drifted back to that fateful day 25 years ago, when her life seemed to be crumbling around her. She had been a scared, naive 22-year-old girl whose world revolved around her arrogant, handsome boyfriend, until he callously tossed her and their unborn child aside without a second thought. If it wasn't for the unconventional proposal from Professor Martin, her academic advisor, there was no telling where her life would have ended up. Marrying the kind older man gave her shelter, stability, the means to chase her dreams and build a new family of her own. She thought back to their simple ceremony witnessed by just a few friends. Then the hasty move to Switzerland when Martin took over the research facility. How he had embraced her son as his own, encouraging her studies even while raising the little boy. Then, years later, their unexpected joy at the birth of their daughter Lily. It was an unorthodox little family, to be sure, but it was filled with love, support, deep respect, and friendship between Samantha and her husband. A bond that had only grown deeper when the kind man passed away 10 years ago, leaving her the beautiful home in Chicago he had promised so long ago. No, her life was not what she had envisioned at 22, but it was pretty damn amazing, all things considered. Jake could feel the dull, throbbing ache even through the haze of pain medication. His eyes fluttered open to take in the stark hospital room, undoubtedly private, only the best for one of Chicago's elite. Instinctively, his gaze landed on the striking brunette standing by the window, silhouetted against the fading summer sunset. She turned slowly, and Jake felt a jolt as her cool green eyes met his own. "Well, well," he rasped out with a weak chuckle. "Fancy meeting you here, Samantha. Although I can't say I'm surprised to find such a brilliant, talented beauty working at a top hospital like this one." Even after all these years, even lying depleted in a hospital bed, the arrogance simply oozed off Jake Reynolds. Samantha felt her lips tighten fractionally as she moved to check his vitals. "I'm your doctor, Mr. Reynolds," she replied in a clipped tone. "And I'll thank you to address me as Dr. Miller while you're in my care." Jake's bravado didn't falter, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Of course, my apologies, Dr. Miller." He emphasized her title in a way that made it sound thoroughly undressed. "Although, if I'm being honest, I've thought about you often over the years. Wondered if you ever thought about me too, about what might have happened if things were different between us." Samantha stilled, her pen hovering over his chart as a rush of memories came flooding back. All the loneliness, heartbreak, and shattered dreams in the wake of Jake's cruel abandonment. She lifted her chin, her eyes chips of emerald ice. "If you're asking if I've spent the past 25 years pining for the selfish, egotistical man who rejected me when I was nothing more than a scared girl carrying his child, then the answer is no, Mr. Reynolds. I haven't wasted so much as a single thought on you." With that, she spun on her heel and exited the room, leaving a dumbstruck Jake gaping after her. For the first time in his charmed life, Jake Reynolds was at a total loss. He had come into this expecting the usual. Smiles, flirtation, maybe some coy banter as he reeled Samantha back in. After all, he always got what he wanted, especially when it came to women. Yet his cocky advances had been batted away like annoying gnats, that gorgeous face regarding him with unmistakable disinterest and disdain. It was completely foreign, and Jake found himself incredibly intrigued. He tried switching tactics, sending her outrageously expensive bouquets daily, leaving instructions they be placed where she was sure to see them. But the flowers were immediately cleared away each time, without so much as a flicker of acknowledgement. This was a situation to which Jake was utterly unaccustomed, and it was rapidly becoming an obsession. One sunny afternoon, he finally caught her outside, eyes glazing over with devastating hope as a white Lexus SUV pulled up beside her. "Mom, everything okay?" A tall, surly young man emerged, the spitting image of Jake's younger self. Samantha smiled serenely at her son. "Everything's fine, Zach. This gentleman just felt a little faint. Shall we go? Your sister are waiting." As they climbed back into the luxury SUV, leaving a stunned Jake prostrate on the porch steps, the son turned around with one last parting remark. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm quite inquisitive by nature, so I've known the relation between us for a while. But I must insist you leave my family alone, or else I'll be forced to take action to make that happen. Good day." Jake could only gape as they drove off, cold realization crashing over him. Here he was, filthy rich, but still so utterly alone, his greed having cost him the twisted lie of a family he never knew he'd been denied.